All right. Welcome, everyone, to another Methow at Home Zoom program. Thanks to Sam Lucy today, our resident farming storyteller, incredible writer. And it's great to see you all. We're having a little bit of a technical difficulty with Sam's audio in that we can hear him, but he cannot hear us. But without any further ado, let's go ahead and hand it over to Sam.
Want me to start? Yes?
Yeah.
Oh, hi. Welcome, my muted audience. Apologize for my ineptitude with the sound on my end, so I can't hear you. We've all realized that. And if you can't hear me, you will connect through text. And I thought that I would start with a couple of short stories, and then maybe we could have some interaction after each one. Neither of these stories is new. I've written a little bit recently, but not near as much as I used to. So they're older stories for sure. And I'm not sure, probably maybe Carolyn has heard one or two of these before. I'm glad to meet some new folks, Jackie, and I see another person there. But I don't know what his name is. And I know Christine, and I've lost sight of Gloria, if she's still with us or not. But yeah, okay. And it was fun. Gloria, I think, listened last month when I read. So these are not the same stories, you can rest assured, Gloria. I do have more than 2 stories in my repertoire. So this time of year is very dear to me in a lot of ways. One, my occupation, and 2, this story I'm going to read is called In the Harvest. And might give you some insight into how I ended up continuing on being a farmer. So without further ado, I will just start reading. I don't have them memorized, so you'll have to watch me look at the page from time to time. In the Harvest. In the harvest, a boy of 5, I rode autumn afternoons in my uncle's 1-ton corn truck that smelled sicky sweet of Chesterfield cigarettes and silage. My aunt drove as we followed my uncle down the paling rows of overhead corn while he sat high upon the faded red Farmall tractor. He towed a 1-row Alice Chalmers chopper that bucked and snarled along like some sour-stomached orange dragon. And he'd every so often have to stop, get off the tractor, unplug by sticking his tan, gristled arms into the center of. Into such vulnerability that always reminded me of the ghost story about a farmer who lost his arm to a chopper and had it replaced with a golden one, till one night someone came and stole it from the foot of his bed, so that when he died, he went looking for it, haunting small town farmhouses with the chorus, "Bring back my golden arm." We doing okay? Grade school got in the way of harvest. I'd dash off the bus, forget to change from school clothes, race down through the maples, jump the summer-thirsty brook, and cross the last green fields of the year where Aunt and Uncle were chopping. I would await at the silo for their return if they were still out harvesting. I was told never to race out and try and find them. Other horror stories came to mind, but these involving children. Once they returned, I'd help them hoe out silage into the New Holland blower that ran off a long leather belt from the other ancient farm wall, and that blew the silage up the orange spout that stretched into a long window at the peak of the octagonal roofed wooden silo. Then I'd wedge myself between aunt and uncle and the cigarette smoke and ride back out to the field where they'd start another load. My aunt's silence and the low grind of the frothing chopper and the soft September light would soon put me to drowsiness. "What's the matter?" my aunt would speak, saying much for a woman who said little. "Sun's in my eyes," I'd say. And for years they'd remind me of this expression, my aunt and uncle, with a smile I never understood till perhaps recently. For years, September's sun has always put me to sleep, riding upon the easiness of it all. Sometime during the corn harvest, the moon would fatten, then slim down again, and my mother would get us to help her cover the tomatoes each night as northern breezes stirred and maple and oak started to turn. Teenage years, I began performing some of the demanding tasks like driving the truck at idle and first gear behind Uncle. There was a certain way, you see, in getting this right. And he'd tell me if I didn't get it right. I couldn't bump the chopper, yet I had to stay as tight as I could because the spray of the fresh silage barely reached beyond the truck's headboard and into the bed. And Uncle didn't want the windshield slimed. Back at the silo, it was I who climbed up to the headboard to rake out the last of the corn, a most precarious position that left one stretched across the slippery, tipped up oak truck bed, 1 foot inches from the chain that emptied the trough into the whirring blower. It wouldn't ever stop in time if something went haywire. Wasn't meant to stop for human limbs. Somehow we got through it all. Then my interest changed, and my interest turned to shotguns and following a gold-spotted dog along the lazy, clear river on crisp autumn afternoons that stunk of the earth, and every leaf changed red and orange and purple from one moment to the next. And music became that of a single working dog bell and thick crimson cover, till it stopped. The dog went solid, and when I walked ahead, a small, plump, russet-colored woodcock went rocketing, twisting up through tight birch and alder and cherry, and made fool of all made man things, but taught me more about cycles and life and death than perhaps anything. And a young girl I knew taught me about softness and a different kind of tobacco than my uncle smoked, and what it was like to roll in leaves and mix that earth smell with others as wet. Somehow riding in the corn truck fell by the wayside. College led me away from the smell of silage, from my bird dog, from the scent of leaves and of the farm, from the ripe smell of gunpowder and the sweet smell of the one I loved. So I quit, and love was lost, but I went on tour. Europe, South America, Alaska, wherever I went didn't matter, for soon I found myself home in New England for harvest. Then I was chopping corn again, not with my uncle and his creaky machinery, but with my brother and with equipment not much more advanced. Something about he and I working a field, he bringing the truck down to empty the dump wagon I'd filled behind the chopper. Something about him leaving me in the field all day, a north wind pressing down, rousing the senses and signifying summer's end. Something about cold apple pie, hot tea, a wool coat, and yes, I'll take the wool pants too. It's brisk out here chopping, hair flying, silk tassels flying, the wind sweeping the land, shadows stretching suddenly into the pine. The mountains, purple to shade, yellow in color. The quiet of a tucked away, time-worn valley where we made rich milk till mean events took away the cows. I've always dreamed of the prairie, of taking a long trip across the Canadian heartland and in the harvest, the sensuous seas of grain, the rich soil for our daily bread that today's world has gotten so far from. I want to feel that treacherous wind Gordon Lightfoot made so wonderfully in The Wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald. But now I'm caught up in these western foothills. Yesterday, alfalfa bales, square goodness that the summer's, Yesterday, alfalfa bales, square, taut, and leafy. Golden, droopy grain of our own, truckload after load. All goodness that the summer's been building toward. Captured as much as we'll ever trap it. But these sorts of things run free. When I go by the harvesting of anything, I get this familiar pull that makes me want to jump in. This is the time all hunger is fortified. Crisp mornings trigger our senses and we rebound from summer's dullness and awaken to the fading light. The long fingers of the river reach slow and deep into the evergreen hills. The sharp, whitening peaks, as if reaching for that vanishing light, searching and at last receding in accepted defeat, creeping back into the valley and bringing down the cool of the north with long wedges of murmuring, untouchable geese. And lying on my back, looking up in an autumn afternoon sky shot full of slow, bottomless clouds. They look chewed on above the rustling leaves that fall groundward seesaw fashion. I can't help but recall first love. In the harvest, I try to reap the fruits of so much in a way that makes me think I actually did the sowing. Fool. We can perhaps plant the land, but we can never claim its seasons. We can live, but not control. At best, we recognize this varied land for the pure gold it is. And now within that golden light, my youngest dozes in the grain truck seat next to me. And I say, "What's the matter, dear? Is the sun in your eyes?" That's all.
So, yeah.
Awesome.
So Louise, you and Diana, you just came on. Sam, we can hear him, but he cannot hear us. He's going to pause in the stories, and if we have questions, we're going to use the chat box to ask any questions we have.
Makes you look to the sun and squint. We can still see the sun a little bit. That's good.
Okay. Thumbs up if we're ready to continue. Looks like, yeah.
5, probably 5. And I wrote that story in 1998. God, is that right? No,
No, because
1996. Yes, I've edited that since then. That's the nice thing about taking the poetics license. And I would mention that with the writing, and because I haven't been doing a great deal of new writing, things like this are fun because I get to review my huge quiver of my past life, and I get to take out and rework things. That recent edition is still quite a long time ago, but the writing process never ends, whether it's old or new, and that's kind of fun. It's not unlike farming. So,
Okay.
so if there's no more questions on that story, I'm happy to move on to the next story. And this story, I know I've read in the Valley before. And the reason I chose this, it has harvest in it, but it actually takes place in the spring. This story was, came to me when I was on a walk one spring day in the very plateau that just got burned. So I thought it would be appropriate to read, and it isn't the serious story either, but it's sticking with agricultural theme. And the only complicated part with this story is, and I hate to do disclaimers, but this is an odd situation. I can't hear you for one thing. There's a change of voice in this that's clear on the page, but I will try to make it clear when I'm reading it. So you should be able to follow up, but if you can't, that's probably the chance, because I'm sure the writing itself is damn good. So here we go. This is called Left to Seed. Generations of dryland farming drift a ghost wind. The same wind the raven circles, chiding me and my dog for invading its hollow peace in a land that rolls on with forever harshness, with sensual rising and falling curves that don't pretend. Rusted field discs, a stationary thresher, and broken grain drill, with a single driver's seat lying engulfed in weeds behind a vacant root cellar. Beyond, a monolithic combine with a hitch rigged for animals, all remnants from a world the word struggles best sticks to. The pack rat riddled house standing firm against the lead gray sky suggests once upon a time man and woman had tried to make this place up. The south side of the two-story house harbors a gone wild rose garden, sunflower, elderberry, hops. 3 headstones surround an ancient scrub oak further the story. One for Pete Paulson, age 7, another for his father Thomas, the latest for Mabel Paulson, quote, wife of Thomas, June 9th, 1894, April 23rd, 1961, last survivor of Boulder Plateau. The great wind begs many questions. I go inside the house of fallen split lath walls, shards of horsehair plaster and straight-grained 20-foot timbers big around as a horse's belly. Floorboards creak. I find the kitchen window for leaning on. Gusts whine through the upstairs windows where shreds of curtain frantically dance. The raw, pungent odor of marmot waste permeates my concentration as I bend an ear to different octaves of wind. I gaze out over the tarnished sink for a long time, studying the strange statue-like basalt formations that give the only relief to this emptiness. Slowly, my fingers find their way along the chipped white paint of the windowsill, dry and hard as turtle shell. There is nothing here for me. Nothing for me nor anybody else, I've decided, when there comes a shift. A changing voice within the very April wind that coaxed me up here to begin with. I strain to listen. Coming up from the Columbia, gonna get me some land. Gonna turn this high plateau to grain. Get it for nothing, make a profit. That's what young Tom Paulson was gonna do. Raise a family, better his homage, make a go of it. Then by God, have a place to call his own. Lay claim to something no one else wanted. How could he know then a place like this was for breaking people? Did he go for a while to have it keep coming back on him? Weather, crop prices, sickness, revenge. Of the time the wind blew so hard one March the roof did come off. And this a rugged house, set level as sundown on all four corners. He got me to join him, carried me up here from a Saturday night dance after the Grange closed. Couldn't get me with child for 2 winters. Then when he finally did, damn near lost the both of us. But I was God again, and that time was fine, so we kept at it. Years so dry, the rain fell dry. And snow drifts deep that the second story was the only way out. But that barn didn't cave, some mules were saved, and though starving may or may not be any better of a way to go, the end is all the same. That good year or two in the middle, we'd all 5 go picnicking and fishing. Head down off this high country where coyotes do the best breeding and sang the best, though Tom always said I had the prettiest voice. Said I sang like I was this place. We built a porch that year too, so we could sleep out and get the cool of the summer night. Till little Jerry woke up one morning with a rattler on his belly. Tom told him not to move, said for no one to move a muscle, even though it cost us an early rising. When the sun came up from somewhere out there to suddenly flood the wheat, that snake slowly uncoiled and slid the length of one of Jerry's legs and on down the steps to underneath the house. Jerry let out a long breath all right and said he counted 14 rattles just as neat as that. When the dog killed it a day later, we all saw that Jerry had missed one. We counted 15. Was the threshing crew came by and stayed, 6 men from down on the river who had it in them to travel this plateau at harvest and tend the 4 of us up here for a little more than meals and a night's sleep. They always brought news from beyond, always were pretty good at predicting future grain prices and sorry for the price at present. But a day's work they were honest about. 2 Clemens boys and the rest Johnsons. As long as you kept them fed, they could thresh oats and wheat good as any crew in the Northwest, far as we knew. Then the first combines came up for lease. Tom said he felt kind of loyal to them boys and decided he'd keep doing it the same way since we already had the stationary thresher. But over time, the combine got too tempting, and once he leased one, Tom never went back. A couple years later, Tom ran across one of the Clemens while on a trip to town. Said he was a drunken mess and spit at Tom. Told Tom he was a thief, had stolen his occupation. Told him the combine would be his undoing and that the end would surely catch him soon. Damned if he wasn't far off. Hard to imagine a tall, strong man such as those boys going that way. Grain alcohol killed his whole family. Then the drought year when the bank wanted everything. Tom would quit, but the spring was urgent and the soil needed tending. That old wheat needed drilling, so Tom asked for some mercy, much as he would any man's, and in the best way he knew how. Though he only had 20 mules after he got done selling, he could plant with just a few, and 18 was what he needed to pull the combine come late August. The wind always quit up here about then. Quit when time came to keep you cool. Harvest, get too hot for snakes. Tom tried to work the combine morning and evening only with the bank on his back. Crop had to come off quick as we had no other means of eating. I was watching one afternoon from the kitchen here, too sick with child to help, at Tom beating his team through the heat. Rawhide reins fat as aspen saplings, mules worn out, and Tom plenty wise to it, but he had to get on with the going. I could hear the sharp cracking and the grunts from up here in the house. Mules working so hard for 2 weeks now and getting slower by the day. Hated to see Tom so. Finally, around 4, an hour after the hour when neither man nor beast could sweat anymore, so I knew the streaks on the mules was blood. The team stopped over on the rise there and would not go another step. Tom took to whipping them like he had just begun. Whipped into a fury, concentrating on the lead pair, Jack and Jake, beating and cussing as if the demons got hold of him until finally Jack went down. Jack, the mule of 30 years, went down and wouldn't get up, and Tom dropped the reins and threw his head in his hands. One by one, he eventually began to unhook the pairs and lead them back to the shade of the barn, except Jack. He let the combine set where it was, half full of grain, and came wild-eyed into the kitchen. Went to the closet, got his rifle. Went to the barn, got a bucket of rolled oats. Still can see him in the sinking sun, feeding the last of our molasses and oats, handful by handful to old Jack. Talking to him, head cradled in his arms till he put the gun to him and buried him right where that mound of rocks is, and that not even today's farmers has moved. Now, if that ain't a man with heart enough to know he's done something hellish. But you ever witness the spring after the seed is in? There's a day or two of slack and the warblers come into this place. Grouse under every bush, geese echoing up from the river, and the long, sweet meadowlark song. The green starts hanging in the aspen groves and out along the edges of the wheat. Balsam root and sage burst, and the sweet grass starts to thicken and gets taller and wilder by the day. And of a Sunday, Tom and I loved and napped under light white clouds, snow-covered peaks in the distance, kids all down at the pond fishing. The whole land building in the blessed spring, soft soil ripe for tending, always lending to some sort of brand new anticipation, though it was just more of the old anticipation with a new kind of twist. Before young man Jim's legs were cut off by the desk when his team ran away, and before Paula ran off long after Pete died of polio and the bank closed on our Jerry, Tom made a go of it much as any man. Some years the backbone of this place was mighty lean. We managed to eat day to day. Enough time has passed now so that solid house Tom and I built in the good years and the equipment he'd saved to pass on to Jerry, I guess just wasn't worth fixing up. Things were left to seed long enough for a new farmer to come in and plaster this whole place, the next and the next with wheat. More land in a day than any man could walk in a season behind a mule, child on shoulders, under a blue sky that only quit when the thunderheads built up, and up in the east, promising rain, never delivering, but that got hope going for weeks on end. From Maybell's window, the April voice trails off over the rolling spring green that slides in around the protruding basalt, across the sunken wind-blown sky. At once I realized the date and discerned the courage it must have taken for her to see just one more spring, to rest easy. But courage is my thinking. How can it really be courage when there was so little choice? Any more than struggle is relevant to a soul with so little choice. To be sure, one thing remains the same. Maybell won't have to worry about this place getting crowded right off. Best fit for Raven and Coyote, the only living souls tough enough to keep it for good. Left to See was the title of that. Copyright 1998. $1998. Yes. Oh, Christ, I can't remember. No, I don't think so. No. There was a house, and there was a lot of rusted farm machinery from horse-drawn days or mule-drawn, mostly mules. Horses are too finicky to work. Yes, that's true, Scott. Not far from there. Yeah, it's great. I hope. I mean, I think all of the folks in this cast here know about the plateaus and have been up there. But I often think, there's people that have lived in the Methow for a while that probably don't even know what it's like to go up onto, the Okanagan Plateau, which obviously has just been transformed. Waterville even, and it's a different world. Yes. It wasn't the cheeriest, but it did have to do with agriculture. And like I said, I felt it was important to read because that land is actually quite beautiful, and it's quite sad to think it all got taken in less than a day. And all
Carolyn,
a lot of
where's
wildlife and homes.
Where's that photo from, Carolyn?
So I guess that's my tribute to a place that I painted a dour picture of, but that I will miss. So if you feel like listening a little longer, I do have a couple poems. Oh. Yeah. So that's above Brewster? Kind of? Could be. Yeah. Well, I recognize the hill in the background. Well, these are a couple short poems. I almost read this poem before I read the stories because we're getting out of summer. Well, we're supposedly leaving summer behind soon. And then the next poem would be moving into fall, my favorite season. So the first poem is called More Words for Trout. What to say that hasn't already? The way they curl in hot oil after their spots in orange have faded, though carefully packed in fern and burlap. The dark, tumbling pools have evened out, lazy in the summer heat. They hang to the fir and pine shadows now. They see you if you're clumsy and explode up and down, otherwise busy eating everything they can. Above, parched whisk-broom hills reverberate a desert of sorts, relentless blue skies on end, the sun a cruel joke to this thirsty land, but the creek still cool, sing-songy, forgiving. The creek pine and willow protected, full of life on which to gorge. A blessed reminder that winter owns the mountains, and the lucid trout are summer's jewels. During the season so short in which to see, hear, and catch. Oh, how ripe their juices. A flick of a bushy fly to any given pool, the float, so fragile. After lofted cast, the fly spun round a branch, then curled off, flipped to a rock, then a jig, a squiggle down into nothing but vulnerability. Shattered, that fast, an orange flash, an honest tug, then mad flipping, racing, angling for cover, reluctant even in hand, no calming this wildness. Even in the end, whose spirit darts back to titanic waters, while in my sack I take home the sweets. Hot skillet, just a minute aside, split when steamy, opened on buttered bread. To taste such beauty, to inhale such a grand place, is the only way to embrace these tiresome summer days. That would be the author's way of conveying summer days. And I may as well read the second one, and then we have a little time or not. And this one takes us a little deeper into my favorite season. It's called the Pall of Fall. So we're going to move from really dry and crispy to nirvana. Wide silence is all, deep waves of wet sage, sharp gold aspen, triumphant yet fragile, this gray November day. Further up, ponderosa have caught and held first snow, as torriding geese muted above swollen clouds, desperate and deliberate, hauntingly old, perfect beyond dreams, sanctify the mood. Garden in the mountains, this place, hard as it is graceful, full of raw cruelty, flowing with forgiveness. The hush permeates, enough to hear grouse up to roost at dusk. Fluttering wings echo. The one-half moon breaches fresh mountains. And coyotes gather while a heavy buck steps one at a time along his careful trail of rubbed-down saplings. My place? Never. Nor anyone else's. The wind claims it one day, swirling copper caps about, leaving bare, thin lines of leaning trees behind, then snow the next, tracing a swath of blood-red dogwood tucked along the trickling creek. A sudden and single breeze makes the bunchgrass jump, then flees up canyon. As if my own quiet fails to rattle me, I clasp the quivering hands of coming winter's ghost. For your muted entertainment. Oh yeah, totally. Yep. And of course, Robert Frost's November poem captures it all. My November Guest, I think is the name of that poem. It's all about shoulder seasons, isn't it, Tracy? I'm waiting. Well, I mean, to be very selfish, I only write for my own enjoyment. That's not completely true, but I started writing a little bit actually in the 5th grade, and there was a high school teacher who was also a family friend who came into our 5th grade classroom, I think in the winter, and we started journals. They were called blue books in those days, or he called them that. Nice comment, Diana. And then I had him for English when I got into high school, and I started journaling. And I've journaled ever since. But I probably wrote my first couple stories before then, maybe junior high. And I'm not sure why. I mean, I love stories. I loved hearing people's stories. And fortunately, I grew up with a cast of characters in my family and around my family and in a beautiful place. So subject matter was never thin. It was too fat to capture. And I still feel that way. And that's one of the frustrating parts about making a living and raising a family and not having the time to write as much. Because I used to be pretty good about getting ideas down, and now often I can't even think of all the good stories I've forgotten. But you know, if I'm lucky, I'll live a long time and start capturing a few more. And it's interesting, the journals, which I'm religious about daily, I hardly ever reference. I mean, I have stacks and stacks of journals. I reference them most for weather. And I mean, they're kind of like, they become my everything journal, but they're kind of my farm journals. So I will look back because I write every morning, and I'll write about the past day and what the hopes are for the current day. It can be anything in there, but I often will mention weather or something in conversation to people. It's kind of a safe subject, although it's getting less safe. And then I'll think, well, where did I remember that? And is that true? And I can go back and reference and say, yeah. For instance, last September was the wettest on record. And right after we tried to burn the valley down with the combine, it rained for 3 weeks. And rained I think it rained 3 inches. And I couldn't get any fall planting done. This year, fall grain's in, it's up, it looks beautiful, everything's harvested, and we didn't have any fires until the other day. And next year, who the hell knows? It's a long answer, I'm sorry.
No, that's great.
Thanks, Carolyn. Who are some of my favorite writers? Well, one of them's on the screen lately here. Diana's readings that are on the radio, I've so enjoyed. They've been a lot of fun. I don't get to listen to radio that much. I have I have actually 2 copies of Diana's book, but I'm kind of like this with movies too. If I read the book, I don't want to see the movie. If I see the movie, I don't want to read the book. And so I've been listening to the stories, and I haven't been reading them because I'd rather listen to them first. So they're fun and not unlike some parts of these. Annie Proulx, I think, is a great, of our time. Let's stick within our time. I'd say Annie Proulx is one of the best writers, or one of my favorite writers at the time. Jim Harrison, but he's dead. Inspired writers. Those 2. I had friend who was a great writer back in the Northeast, Howard Mosier, and he's also passed. Poetry, you know, Robert Frost, Mary Oliver. I could go on and on. Willa Cather, I'm thinking I enjoy her work a lot. I mean, I have lots of them.
Anybody else have any questions for Sam? I like your comment here, Diana. Reading your 50-year-old diaries.
I'm missing your conversation. Thanks, Carolyn. It's nice to see you always. Although I like to see a bigger you. Thanks for joining. It's fun. Took me out of my day. An artist from the East. Well, I'm from the East. You kind of are. Diana is. Thanks, Diana. Yeah, back in the fields. We're back to the granary. Don't know the name. And did Jackie stay on or not? I don't see her picture. Hopefully I didn't scare her off. Okay. Good. Next time I'll try to get my electronics dialed in. Oh, that's not going to help with the voice though.
No, no.
I'm scared to touch anything.
Okay. Oh, I needed to pause the recording. Oops. Bye-bye.